Hi everyone, my name is Aoife O'Toole and I'm the Public Art Coordinator with Mayo County Council, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. This is one of many events that we are facilitating to mark the launch of the Touchstones, a public art commission by the artist James Winnett. I think a lot of you have met James. This project is part of our public art programme and it's funded through the Percent for Art scheme through Transport Infrastructure Ireland, linked to the N5 Road project, and also the Department of Housing, Heritage and Local Government. So Percent for Art funding is a wonderful opportunity for local authorities to commission contemporary art projects and present them to the public in everyday settings for people to enjoy and experience. And public art can be in many art forms and it can have many possible outcomes. We ran a 2-stage open competition with an independent selection panel, and James was successful and has been working on this project for the last 2 years. And it involves 10 stone carvings at Turlough, Islandeady, Breaffy and Raheens Woods. There's been great collaboration and enthusiasm for the project among the local communities. We started off, I went into local communities and we did surveys and some research into the artist brief. It was quite obvious from the outset that each community wanted their own distinctive community and location represented in the project. I think James has really managed to do that. So with the rain coming, I'm going to round up now and hand you over to James.
All right, thank you all for coming. Rain is on cue. I'm actually going to start a little bit around the corner by the round tower itself and then come back to here, and then we'll go over to the stone in the wall and finish up. So the way that I've developed this project, initially I started looking at all the sites and what kind of linked them together. I was interested right from the start in the location here with the round tower and this kind of alignment that runs all the way down towards Croke Patrick. You can't see Croke Patrick from here, but if you're on top of the tower, I think you would be able to see it. Also, the new road runs in that direction, the river goes in that direction, and all the sites that I've been working on, apart from Breaffy, all seem to have this kind of link in the landscape going down towards Croke Patrick. So I was researching that as a kind of start point and thinking, how could I make a trail of artworks that kind of linked with the landscape, physically, kind of geographically, topographically, but also the mythological landscape, the folklore landscape that's kind of layered on top of that, the social memory that kind of exists in communities and people here locally, and how that overlaps with kind of storytelling. So I've written a story. This isn't the only story for these stones. The idea is that you can kind of use the stones as a jumping off point. They're called touchstones because you can touch them. Everybody likes to touch stones, but also they're a kind of point of contact between you and the landscape and with story, and also with this kind of overlap between archaeology, folklore, that type of thing. And I'm going to talk about the Gobán Saor. Now, do you know, have you heard of him? He's this kind of mythical mason type figure that was said to have built all the round towers. And when I was looking at the kind of folk archive, particularly in this location, it came up 3 or 4 times that this tower itself here was built by Gobán the builder. He has the kind of overlap with the kind of smith character in mythology. He's also this guy who kind of travels around the whole of Ireland building these towers. So he's a kind of archetype of the mason, basically. And he's a useful kind of lens for me and this project because although I've carved the stones, I also like the idea that you don't know who's carved the stones. You know, my name isn't necessarily on them. They don't necessarily look like artworks. You might come across them, particularly once they've weathered in, and think, what is this? Who's done this? What's this all about? And hopefully some of that curiosity draws you into the stone, but also the stories that are there behind the artwork as well. So Gobán built the stones. It's me, really. And he's a kind of character in this story. And what I tended to do was write a story in other projects and then give you, here's the history, here's some kind of archaeology on the location, here's a bit of that. And I've not done that with this project. I've tried to bring all of that kind of contextual information and kind of layer it into the encounters that he has with the characters along the way. This will make more sense as we get going, but see what you think of this. Okay, a long time ago, there was a stonemason known as the Gobán Saor who travelled the length and breadth of Ireland carrying his tools on his back. He walked from place to place and would stop for a while where there was work to be done. At night, he would share food, stories and songs with the people that he met. It's said that Gobán built many of the great towers, the castles and churches in Ireland. He knew the best stone for each job and the best job for each stone. He forged his own tools in the fire and could fashion a chisel with just 3 blows of his hammer. Gobán knew where to pass through the mountains and where to ford the river. He could read the movements of the clouds when they spoke of rain. He knew the stories of the rivers and the mountains, the names of plants and the habits of the animals. He understood how everything was connected, just like the stones in a wall. Remove one too many and the wall falls. Stone number 1, the Round Tower. One autumn day, while Gobán was busy building a round tower on the hill above Turlough, an eagle came and perched nearby. "I am the eagle of the cold cliff," said the eagle. "I am old now, and it's time for me to rest. Would you mind building this tower a little higher, so that I can perch here and look to the mountain of my ancestors?" "Where are the mountains of which you speak?" asked Gobán. "Build the tower a little higher, and I will show you," replied the eagle. So Gobán collected more stones, shaped them with his chisel, and climbed back up the ladder to add a little height to the tower. It was a week after Samhain, when the final capstone was laid, and the eagle returned to see the work complete. "Very well," said the eagle, gesturing towards the horizon. "Now I can see Nathan to the north, and Cracken Eagle, the Eagle Mountain, to the west. Sit with me and watch the sun set into my grandmother's home. Do you see her head bowed and her wings set on either side?" Gobán held his hand to his eyes to shield the golden light, and gazed westward at the sun as it set precisely into the mountain, just as the eagle had described. However, as he stood up, dazzled by the sun, he tripped and tumbled from the roof, banging his head on the way down. When he came to, Gobán realised that his fall had been broken by a giant spider web. "I've been weaving this web for you since the day you began building that tower," said the spider. Gobán thanked the spider and asked how he might ever repay the favour. "Carve 2 webs on the wall so that they will protect this place like this web has protected you. Carve 1 for the moon and 1 for the sun. Make the sun like a wheel, and in its spokes place 10 round knots for the stones you are yet to carve." Gobán looked to the wall and asked the spider what she meant by the 10 stones, but when he turned back, she was gone. Gobán carved the 2 webs as the spider had described and went up to gather his tools. The eagle, overhearing the conversation, asked if Gobán would carve her likeness into the wall. Gobán agreed on condition that she sang while he worked. Gobán carved an eagle on the wall and gave her 2 heads, 1 for the sunrise and 1 for the sunset. The eagle promised to help Gobán if ever he was in need. Before he left, Gobán carved another stone and placed it into a wall nearby so that others might know the story of his encounter in this place. So here we go, Gobán climbing the ladder, finishing the tower. You've got the eagle here from the building there with the 2 heads, looking to the kind of sunset and the sunrise, and they're both looking across to Kirkpatrick here from the top. This is the web that we saw earlier with the 10 stones inside it, but it becomes a motif to kind of represent the sun. Further on, it kind of changes its meaning along the way. And then over here you have Nathan as well. Gobán made his way south from the tower and came to a place where an old yew tree grew, its gnarled and blackened branches reaching out like an old hand. Placing his palm against the damp of the trunk, Gobán heard a deep voice that seemed to come from within. "I am the yew tree of the Turlough," said the tree. "I've seen the waters rise and fall. I've seen 3 great chieftains come and go, 3 crannogs on the lake, and 3 serpents in the waters beneath." Remembering the song of the eagle, Gobán asked if she too had a song to share. In exchange, he would carve a stone so that others might hear her voice. The old tree obliged and sang a song of a time when the plain of the yews spread all the way to the great mountain, so that no yew was without company. She sang too of the island of the boar, and of the Samhain sunset falling over the island of the white cow. As she sang, Gobán watched a limb unfurl from the centre of the tree and reach out to the ground. He saw how it brushed against another branch, and the 2 merged together, and where it touched the ground, tiny fingers fed out, as if preparing for a new tree to take root. "Although I have seen many things," said the yew, "there is one much older than I, for it is said there are 3 great ages, the age of the eagle, the age of the yew, and the age of the caliac. Carve me a stone with a plain of 9 yews, where the wolf and the boar roam free, 2 eagles in the treetops, 3 serpents at their roots, an otter swimming with the salmon. 10 fruits for the stories you seek. Carve the mountain of Nathan at the centre, for it is there that you must go if you seek a tale older than mine. Look for the caliac with her herd, tell her I sent you, and ask for the cold that came in the time before the yew." So walking upstream, Gobán passed a path between the river and a lake. He saw a grand house perched on a grassy terrace, an island of trees crowned with crows' nests, and a group of people gathered at the lakeside. An old man approached to tell his story. Many years ago, one of the Fitzgeralds had a pot of gold, and he let it down into the water by a chain. He stuck an iron in the ground and tied the chain to it by a rope, but when the pot of gold got to the bottom, the iron gave way. When that Mr. Fitzgerald, who hid the gold, died, his successor wanted to get the gold, so he employed a diver to go down for it. The diver went down several times, and the last time he said he saw something awful like a cat. When Mr. Fitzgerald saw that he could not get the pot of gold, he got a chain pump and pumped out the water, but he could not get to the gold. Then he ordered the people to throw branches and straws in the place of the water, and he made an island which covers the pot of gold. Gobán thanked all the people, and he found a stone to make a carving so that others might know about the gold in the lake. When this was nearly finished, a strange figure with a scar on his face appeared. I was a workman at the house that you see on the hill, and it's my fate to guard the gold in this lake. The man took Gobán up to the house and showed him a painting of George Robert, the fighting Fitzgerald. See the baby that wrestles a serpent? See the vine that coils around a tree? See the boy flying the kite? Carve me a stone that tells his tale. 3 dice for the gambler, thrown out from the court. 2 pistols for duels, for the blood that he sought. A child with a snake, too reckless to care. The rake in his carriage, beside his pet bear. A fine dapper gent, all suited and booted. The ruins of an empire, a home that was looted. 2 trees for those planted, as linen was milled. A dog for the barrister's hound that he killed. A kite flying high, the thrill as he ran, strung up from a tree for killing a man. Following the path that wound around the river, Gobán spotted a tall, thin woman standing statuesque at the water's edge. As he approached, she turned and swept back her long grey hair to reveal an unblinking golden eye. She seemed familiar to Gobán, so he asked if she knew where to find the Eagle of the Forge. "Come with me and I'll take you to the eagle of which you speak." As they travelled together, they exchanged stories, and the woman told Gobán of a time when a wolf came to this place. "There was once a wolf that walked here as we walk here today. The wolf had a bone stuck in his throat and was asking the other animals for help dislodging it. He was thin and weak on account of not being able to eat, but all of the other animals feared him and refused to help. With the wolf unable to hunt, herds of deer came to graze the riverbanks until nothing but grass grew and the river became sick. Eventually the exhausted wolf came across a heron fishing at the water's edge. The heron was struggling to find anything to eat herself. When the wolf approached and begged her for help, "Heron, would you use your long bill to remove this bone from my throat? I'll give you a great reward," promised the wolf. The heron nodded silently and cautiously placed her head inside the wolf's gaping jaws. Once the bone was removed, she asked expectantly for her reward. The wolf snapped, "You have put your head inside a wolf's mouth and taken it out in safety. That should be enough of a reward for you." The wolf trotted off smugly and was soon hot on the trail of a deer that had grown too accustomed to his absence. The heron turned and carefully stepped her way back down to the river. With each step, young trees began to sprout and reach up, shading the river once again in dappled light. Poised in the cooling shallows, she waited patiently as fish returned. Gobán thanked the woman for her story and carved a stone so others might know the tale. As they parted ways, Gobán noticed 2 figures standing watch on the horizon. A sadness came over the woman as she walked up to meet them. "Tread softly when you walk at Gort na Folla," she said, "for there are those of us that remember why this place is called the Field of Blood." So Gobán left the river at Turlough and followed a boreen south towards Breaffy. On the way he walked with a group of people who had been toiling in the fields. They spoke of how hard the work had been cutting the turf in the bog that summer, and how the rain had come just when they were footing the sods into stacks for drying. They noted how the basket maker would soon be harvesting the willow to weave all sorts of baskets and creels, and how some were good for vegetables and fruit, while others were more suited to collecting potatoes. They talked of taking water from the deep well and caring for their children, and they talked of the great strength of the blacksmith in Breaffy. They spoke too about the big house and how the lord and lady had nannies and nursemaids and butlers and cooks to wait on them, and they mentioned the gatekeepers and the stewards and the gardeners on the estate. Gobán continued south until he came to Breaffy itself, where he passed the forge, where the blacksmith was busy shoeing a horse. He saw the stonemason chipping away at a stone for the graveyard, and further on, a sprawling mulberry tree next to Breaffy House. Gobán had never seen such a strange tree, its serpent-like branches plunging into the ground, twisting and rising, just like he had seen with the yew tree. A black cat stalked in the shadows, and an eagle landed up high. The eagle told Gobán all about the Brown family who'd lived in the house and how they had planted the tree hundreds of years before. He proudly pointed to his image on a stone crest above the door and the words "Suave razon," follow reason, carved below. Gobán thanked the eagle and found a stone to make a carving of the mulberry tree, with the eagle perched on top. He thought back to all the people he had seen on his journey and he decided to carve their story on the reverse. Around the tree he placed all of their tools and belongings so that others might know the story of their work. So the autumn light was fading as Gobán walked towards a tall stand of trees, their pale trunks like the pillars of some long forgotten temple. He came to a flat slab of stone where he sat and played his harp as a gathering of crows came in for the roost. Gobán sang of the dark depths of the forest and the power of the wolf, once so ubiquitous here that this place was known as the Plain of the Wolves. He sang of the pack gathering at dusk and their calls reaching out across the stillness of the plain. Looking to the north, he saw the grey hulk of Nathan Mountain and thought of the wolf that led him there to the Cailleach's house. A cool breeze played across the harp strings for a moment, and he felt like he could hear a distant howl. Gobán silenced the strings with his hand, and again he heard the lone cry of a wolf, only this time clearer. Gobán continued to play, as if drawing the wolf towards him, until finally a grey shape emerged from the darkness, weaving its way through the trees. The wolf came to sit alongside Gobán and began to howl, her voice filling the night sky as she sang of the strength of the pack and the bond of family. She sang of the thrill of the hunt and of hearing her friend the raven signal that there was deer up ahead. She sang too of chasing the Samhain sun as it set over the great Wolf Mountain to the west. The wolf turned her gaze back at Gobán. Where you sit today, a warrior by the name of Faled sat many years ago. I came to him injured from the hunter's trap, and he healed my paw so that I myself could hunt again. He wore a wolfskin on his back, but there was great respect in his wearing of it. Many years later, as the forests were cleared, a hunter came to this place with no other desire than to kill every last wolf that roamed this land. The wolf told Gobán the story of the daughters of Eretak, 3 sisters who every Samhain would leave their home, the cave of Crocan, and transform into wolves to hunt on the land above. Gobán and the wolf slept outside that night. In the morning, the wolf showed Gobán a safe route for the forest and promised to help if he was ever in need. Gobán thanked the wolf and carved a stone before he left so that others might know her story. Gobán made his way deeper into the woodland, following a network of paths through the trees. He passed a hunting hollow and the ruins of a place where a wolf family had once lived. Further on, he came to a group of people who were standing around a large hole with mounds of freshly dug soil piled up on either side. There was much excitement as one of them lifted a round slab of gritstone from the earth and brushed away the dirt to reveal the word Lonsecnan. The man in charge, who went by the name of Brown, called Gobán towards him and seeing that he was a stonemason, asked Gobán to carve a large slab along with an inscription that would record how the stone had been found alongside a skeleton of a 12-foot giant. Gobán hadn't seen any such skeleton, but carved the text as requested. Pleased with the work, Brown asked Gobán if he'd visit his relative's estate at a place called the Neil, where another inscription was required. Gobán agreed on one condition, that Brown share the oldest story that he knew on their journey south. Later that day, as they approached the Neil, Brown told an epic tale of the first battle of Moytura, which was fought between the mighty Fir Bolg and the Tuatha De Danann. He described the great armies marching over the Mayo landscape and the exploits of the valiant warriors who had fallen in the fray. He showed Gobán a huge stone cairn where Yoki Mac Airc, the last Fir Bolg king, was buried, and further on, a cairn that marked the grave of his son, Slange the Fair. Brown explained how the cairn was being reshaped into a huge stone pyramid, topped with a statue of Apollo. Heading south, they came to a fork in the road where Brown pointed out a standing stone that marked the grave of Lu Lamfada, the great warrior and master craftsman of the Tuatha De Danann. Turning back towards the Neil, Brown led Gobán to the site of a new monument that would let others know of the great significance of the area. This stone was to be named the Gods of Neil, and it would have ancient carvings of a wolf, a unicorn, and an angel placed on top. Once the inscription was complete, Gobán returned north to Breaffy and carved another stone showing Brown finding the giant skeleton, surrounded by all of the other things that he'd seen that day. Gobán left the woods at Breaffy and headed west to the River Shura, where he found a boat to head upstream. He rowed through Loch Lana and Castlebarloch until at the head of the third lake he came to an island where he could go no further. Floating towards the shore, Gobán saw goats grazing on bilberries and all sorts of coloured stones. There were pink stones, warm sandstone boulders, white blocks of quartz, and slabs of limestone covered in circular holes. Gobán imagined all the things that he could carve if he lived here, and seeing that he wasn't getting any younger, he decided to settle and build a house nearby. Over time, other stonemasons and carpenters came to this place, and it became known as Rinne Saor, the point or the place of the mason. Together they built walls and houses and no less than 27 stone-cut bridges to cross all of the streams and the ditches that ran across the land. One day, when Gobán was starting work on a church on the island, he met an old woman who was washing clothes at the lake shore. She explained that St. Patrick had passed this place on his way to the mountain that became known as Croagh Patrick. Gobán asked the woman what more she had heard about Patrick's time on the mountain. It is said that Patrick spent 40 days at the summit, said the woman. He was attacked by a flock of giant birds, but by ringing his bell, he overcame the birds and banished them into a hollow called Lugna Demon. Then he fought a serpent named Cora, and again used his bell to throw her into a lake that is now known as Loch na Cora. Gobán thanked the woman and continued building the church, making sure to align it precisely with Croagh Patrick on the horizon. Gobán saw that there were 2 times of the year when the sun appeared to fall into the peak of the mountain, the cross-quarter days either side of the winter solstice, on the 7th of November and the 3rd of February. He started to imagine the mountain like the centre of a great wheel, with all sorts of alignments radiating out on either side. Gobán added a carving of the woman that he'd met into the wall of the church, and by the window he carved a series of geometric shapes to protect against any malevolent spirits that might try to get in. Once the job was complete, he added another stone to a wall nearby so that others might know the story of this place. So many years had passed and Gobán was now an old man. His hands were still strong for the work, but he rarely strayed too far from home. In the preceding years, a wicked giant had come to rule over the land, and there was much disquiet in the ranks of the masons of Rinne Saor. One day, when he was returning home from playing his harp at the lake, Gobán found the giant's men had taken everything he owned: his tools, his house, the crops from the fields, and even the land on which they grew had been stolen. Gobán knew that the giant was far too powerful for the likes of an old mason, but he felt there had to be a weakness somewhere. He took a boat on Bilberry Lake and began combing the shore for answers. As evening drew near, he came to a place known as Raheen, and a wooded hill where some say a fairy fort once stood. Gobán settled down near a hazel tree at the fringe of the woods and played his harp to herald the coming of the night. A solitary crow flew above a low mist that was forming in the fields and hopped on top of Gobán's harp. The crow sang of her longing for the return of her friend the wolf. This reminded Gobán of the wolf song from Breaffy, and so Gobán and the crow sang together about the strength of the wolf pack and the hunting on the slopes of the Wolf Mountain. Gobán sang out into the emptiness of the night and listened for a reply, knowing full well that the last of the wolves had been driven from this land many a year before. The third day Gobán walked the shore in search of the giant. Feeling hopeless, he turned to make his way back to Raheen when he came across an otter lying motionless on the bank. As he approached, the otter raised its head. "My home has been destroyed. I am struggling to find enough fish to feed my family." Gobán gave the otter some food, which the otter gratefully took and promised to help if he was ever in need. On the 4th day, when Gobán was washing his feet in the lake, he saw a slender trout swimming in the shallows. Gobán edged closer, trying not to disturb the water, and to his surprise, he managed to catch the unsuspecting fish. The trout called out from Gobán's grip, "Oh, please let me go, and I'll tell you how to conquer the wicked giant and get all of your property back." Eager to hear more, Gobán paused and listened. "Well," said the trout, "he cannot be killed as he does not carry his soul within him, but he has it hidden. Go to the tallest tree near the giant's palace, and in the heart of the tree is a hare. In the heart of the hare is a duck, and in the heart of the duck is an egg, and in the egg is the giant's soul. You must cut down the tree with 1 stroke. If you make 2 strokes, the tree will only grow thicker. As soon as you get the egg, throw it at the middle of the giant's forehead." Gobán thanked the trout for his advice and set off in search of the tree. Gobán followed a muddy track that led across the fields towards the palace, and he noticed the giant was away hunting. Reaching the tree, he summoned all of his might and chopped the tree down with 1 stroke. As it came crashing down, a hare bolted from the broken trunk and sped out across the fields. Seeing the speed at which the hare ran, Gobán thought of the wolf from Breaffy. "Help, help," Gobán crowed in desperation. "Where are you, wolf?" And the wolf appeared and chased down the hare. But as it was caught, a duck flew from its mouth. Seeing the duck fly off high into the sky, Gobán thought of the eagle from Turlough, and he called out, "Help, help, eagle of the cold cliff, where are you?" "Here I am," said the eagle, as she swooped down after the duck. But just as it was caught, the duck flew out over the lake and laid an egg which plunged into the water. Thinking that all was lost, Gobán called out to the otter, "Help, help, otter of the whirlpool, where are you?" "Here I am," replied the otter, as she swam out to search the dark depths of the lake. And some time later he saw her swimming towards him with the egg in her mouth. As the evening drew near, Gobán saw the wicked giant returning, carrying another mason's stolen possessions on his back. Gobán hid behind the fallen tree, and as the giant was coming near, Gobán flung the egg at the giant and hit him in the middle of the forehead. As the giant fell to the ground, the spell was broken, and all of Gobán's possessions were returned to the very spot where they had been. Several years had passed, and Gobán was truly an old man now. Knowing that his days were coming to an end, he'd taken on an apprentice, and this was her first summer on the road, working away with the exuberance of energy and youth. When he had the energy, Gobán would still walk across the fields and return to Raheens Woods to play his harp at sunset. He enjoyed noticing the changing of each season, seeing the bluebells carpet the woodland in spring, looking for the red campion coming into flower and collecting the bilberries on Bilberry Sunday. He returned to the same slab of stone, and he remembered the songs of the eagle and the wolf, and the time when they'd worked together to defeat the wicked giant. One long summer's day, as Lunasa approached, Gobán spoke to a couple of people who were busy making a hayrick in the field nearby. "Why do you work so hurriedly?" asked Gobán. "The birds are singing, there is no rain on the horizon to cause such haste." "Our stores are bare and we are hungry," said the woman. "We must get the harvest in soon, as there is to be a great battle over the coming days. The moon is waning, and it will soon be Crom Dove Sunday, when Crom will try and take the harvest for himself. We build this reek for Lugh, in the hope that he will prevail over the crooked, stooping Crom." 3 months had passed, and there were more leaves fallen than there were those left on the trees. The harvest had been good, and the belly of the land was fat with the feast. A cool wind blew now, as Gobán returned to the stone and laid down to watch the sunset. He looked at his own hands, their scars and calluses like carvings, each telling their own story, and he thought of his young apprentice, the strength in her arms and the spark in her eye. And he thought of the old Cailleach, and he thought of the harvest and the cycle, and the land and the year. A crow came to perch on the end of the stone, and Gobán and the crow watched the sun as it rolled and dimmed and fell from the sky towards the great mountain in the west. Lying on his side, Gobán watched the mountain, and he saw it in a way he'd never seen it before, as the body of the Cailleach, her belly fat with the harvest at Samhain. And he thought too of the cold of winter, and of the rain, and of the dormant darkness that would come. And he thought then of springtime, of Imbolc, when again the sun would track north and fall into the land, stirring from its sleep, a land pregnant with the coming of spring.